This is the second video in the series on how to build an engine in the card game Dominion. In this video, we'll talk about the principles of diagnosing a kingdom. So before turn 1 even happens, or you've even made your first buy, how to look at a kingdom and decide what your overarching strategy is going to be. The first question you want to ask towards that end is an engine even possible in the first place? Big money is always possible. You can always buy silvers and golds. They're available in every kingdom, and you can throw in an action card or two and start buying provinces. Engines, on the other hand, have a number of components, not all of which will be present, and so in not every kingdom will an engine be viable. So before you come out the gates, buying cards that look like they're going to help you build your engine, you have to first step back and decide, will that engine even come together? Is it missing crucial components? And so this video is going to focus on what those crucial components are and how to identify whether they exist in a kingdom. Having just said engines aren't always possible, the big caveat I want to give to that is they probably are viable more often than you currently think they are. A major misconception I see amongst a lot of new and intermediate level players is that big money is just generally the dominant strategy, that only exceptionally powerful kingdoms will have action cards strong enough to overcome the big money strategy, and that most often the engine just won't come together. That's a reasonable misconception to have, just because it's probably true of the level they're currently playing at. Big money is easy to do well. It will always get you provinces relatively quickly, and there's not a whole lot of decisions to make in the first place for you to go wrong on. Whereas engines, they're complicated, they involve getting a lot of cards, playing in the right order, and certainly a lot more underlying strategic vision that just might not have been fully developed yet. And so if you're starting out, you'll see that big money usually wins. That doesn't suggest it's generally a better strategy, just that it's the better one to do if you're still inexperienced. What you'll find is that the better you get, the more big money drops off and the more engines start to win out. And that's just because big money is a low skill ceiling. By the same virtue of it's hard to do poorly, there's not a whole lot of room for improvement because there's not a whole lot of decisions in the first place. Whereas engines, while complicated, they can scale up exponentially and start scoring huge amounts of points. So if well executed, engines will almost always beat a big money deck. I would estimate top levels of Dominion, the big money strategy is certainly less than 10% of the time the best strategy in the deck. You'll find that engines are almost always dominant and usually possible, even if they don't initially seem to be. So we're about to talk about what the main components are to make sure an engine is present in a given kingdom. But before I do that, the one other caveat I want to give is that even if one of these components I'm about to mention is missing, that does not necessarily mean you can't play an engine. It often just means you have to play around the component that's absent or lacking. And we'll discuss in future videos how you can do that. So the four main components of an engine are draw, actions, trashing, buys. Draw is just the ability to get more cards in your hand. Remember, the goal of an engine is to play with more than just a handful of cards. You want to play with your whole deck of cards each turn, and so you need to get all of those cards into play, and that first means drawing them into your hand. Secondly, actions. Here, I don't mean action cards. I mean plus action, the ability to play action cards. By default in a game of Dominion, you're allowed to play one action card per turn, and engines tend to want to play a lot of action cards. So you'll need a lot of plus action to fully execute an engine, and so you'll need to identify whether an engine gives you the ability to play multiple action cards per turn. Thirdly, trashing. Pretty straightforward. You want to trash to get the unneeded cards out of your deck, and that's very important for an engine because you want to draw your whole deck, which can be difficult because there's a bunch of junk in there, and so you want to see whether the kingdom allows you to trash your cards. Fourth and finally is buys, which I'm including in the same category as gains. Cards that can gain you cards, even if they don't give you plus buy. I would say they're functional equivalent to plus buy. This sort of unified category is just cards that give you the ability to get more than one card into your deck per turn. Engines can be difficult to pull off if they're only improving by one card per turn, so you want to see if the kingdom gives you the ability to buy or gain additional cards over and above the one buy you have naturally. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of things to check in a kingdom for to decide whether an engine is viable. There's a whole lot of other factors to go into. These are just the main four. There's all sorts of other stuff, like actions can function as alternative payload that can be stronger than gold or silver. They can attack your opponent. They can do things like sift through your cards to find the right ones to make your deck more reliable. And all those are potentially relevant. But in the next four videos, I'm going to focus on these main four components and how to interpret them and how to identify them and decide which cards contribute towards those four key goals of an engine.